أنا بدي واحد بجوكم سوري مسيس ماري بدي كافري يجي تكلم نجي نجي نستعمل أنا كافري لكن هو ده بدي نقول لك جسم يتصل على سكان فدراسة أنا يمكن استعمل هم قاعد أنا بدي استعمل جميل لكن هو ده أقول جميل ده يعني رجال أنا أقول ده ممكن الشيء أول الشيء فكر الشيء أول شيء أنا أجيب الشيء لكن هو ده أقول جو أقواتي لكن هو ده زي ما نشأ سلامنا أنا أقول جو لكن هو ده يتصل ده نفسه يمكن يأخذ جهة دم داوي أو من هتسل إذا استشر دم داوي أو من هتسل إن بيدو أنا بورد أنا بشر بورد دم داوي أو من هتسل إن بورد بيو دم داوي من هتسل إن أنا بيو لكن هو ده أقوله ودياني بنسجل أروني هذا دم سلسلة لكن هو ده أقوله أقواجي as always, just to give the greetings and the opening for the day, as everybody knows that it is what? As everybody knows that we do not close at the end of the day. Like yesterday, there is just quite simply an acknowledgement of that day has come to an end. But we are open right from the beginning, from the first day, right until the end. So these are small openings. They are not like the complete Honda-Gari Wadeka. Anyways, just to start off by acknowledging or recognizing the power or the energy of the day. Today seems to be a slow day. We're moving slow. Seems to be a little bit heavy. Something, a little bit heavy. Something in the air. Not just to get us to even be just moving so slow. Anyways, I don't know if anybody else has experienced that or feels that. This is what I have sensed right from the beginning when I woke up this morning. It was maybe perhaps to do with what happened last night. Of course, we drove Elizabeth back to the airport and she was going back to returning to her home. And that was a heavy thing. She was with us for, I don't know how long, a couple of weeks. And we, of course, you come to become accustomed and used to seeing somebody or a certain thing. So if you get into a pattern like a repetitive thing every day, and then one day it's not there, well, then it'd feel like there's something missing there, something that, something missing. No, I won't say it's because of this, but I don't know. We would have to see also. Ask Elizabeth what she is experiencing, what she is feeling. But here, anyways, this is what the sense is today. of that it's like a heavy day, it's a slow day, and almost like a tired day, like low energy. Anyways, we're gonna begin like usual. If there is anything that anybody has questions or anything overnight that has come to mind, keep in mind that yesterday not only was it were we continuing in the recital of the law, but we also uh, initiated our next great effort, our next big adventure, to return a buffalo from Britain back here to Turtle Island. Anyways, that is a huge thing, and as we discussed that yesterday and established that like on official basis, that it is something of great importance, something to think about. Contacts have already been made with our friends out west, the Mine family, to see about the receivership of this buffalo, just to get the minds thinking about, not the Mine family, but to get all our minds, not just the Mine family, get our minds thinking about this thing that we have to do. Sort of like if you remember when the Mine family was here for the law recital after they left, they were here for almost the whole thing, like 20 something days. And when they left, it was a hard thing to say goodbye to them, and you could really feel like an uprootedness. And that's what we said after they were gone. We said, "Oh no, we lost our minds." Anyways, so here you go. If there is anything, a lot of things to consider. Uh, Points of law. Our friend has returned home. Um the this thing about returning to Buffalo. Anyways, if there's anything, there you go. We'll pass the around, and if not, you know what to do. So,
My name is Asa Tarafison, Brenda. I wanted to take the time to give you, in the Maya family, my respect for your auntie, for your aunt passing yesterday morning. My condolence to all of you.
My name is Stone. I'm with the Haudiscohéré. I'm under the protection of the Haudiscohéré, the Bear Clan, here at the Ganonsesne in Ganawage. I wanted to acknowledge everything that's been said, starting with what the steward or Brigitte Donzerio said about all of the efforts that were made yesterday, and how we're all so interconnected through the buffalo, through the and through the clams. Uh, I'm thinking of his auntie also that I saw Friday night, and I know she was Bear Clan. And I saw a movie last night. It was actually a film documentary at the Native Presence Festival. It was called Words from a Bear. It was about a very well known uh, American. He's kind of I guess, a unique personnage. His name's um, O. Scott Namade. He's of Kiowa. Both his parents were Kiowa from the Oklahoma area, so he's definitely Kiowa. But he's also a super well-known American, so-called American Native author. Okay, but it starts with the bear. The film starts with a bear that's like a grizzly that's sleeping on a rock in a stream. I've never seen that because just to get the bear on the rock, and that the bear was taking sunbathing in the rock. So what I'm trying to say is coming from what I've learned just driving in Ganawage. I had to remind myself that I was under the protection of the Rodiscaware of the bear clan. And ever since I got here 30 years ago, it's been the same thing. It's the same for most of us here. But the Mine family also is coming from a place called Masquachese, but Masqua in their language means bear. So there's something about the bear. Auntie Esther that's gone, she's bear clan. The mines are in the Bear Hills, Masquachese. This film about Scott Nomady, who's a very articulate writer, great poet, even a painter, and the kind of person that you're so used to kind of hearing about people like this, like Robert Redford is like just touting this guy's horn, saying how great a writer is, James Earl Jones, all kinds of very well, and also a lot of native people in this stateside that are recognizing his talents. But the thing that I wanted to just acknowledge was how the filmmaker, whose name was Jeffrey Palmer last night, acknowledged the recital going on here because he's Kiowa or Kiowa also. That's why he wanted to make this film on O. Scott Nomady or N. Scott Nomady. And, when you see Robert Redford, who's very aged now, he's all wrinkled, he's quite elderly, Robert Redford. When you see him saying that this is the man that they need to be doing a film on and bringing the knowledge of the people, he's bringing an artistic knowledge of the people, or I mean, a total connection to the land and to the spirituality of his people, but through the medium of like English language, So he wins the Pulitzer Prize in 1969 because he's writing a novel very well known called something about the dawn, and it's about the life of a native person from the USA that at the height of the Vietnam War. And it was unheard of in those days that there would be that kind of writing that would be so well known. But also, he wins the Pulitzer Prize. That's also, in those days it was unheard of. But the route that this guy goes, and this is why I'm speaking about this, is kind of the route that maybe Elizabeth is on, because now she's back in the UK and she's gonna do all the things that she needs to do and that she's been planning to do. We heard about that yesterday and the last 2 weeks she was with us, eh? But when a person has to deal with the other side of the wampum belt, when you have to live on the American side or the Canadian side of the British side of the wampum belt, eh? There's a language that you have to speak, and um, in this case of N. Scott Nomady, he's using the English language, but to talk about the land, to talk about the spirituality of the people, the prayers, and um, uh, the, the respect of the elders. So that's what I'm trying to remember myself and share with you, that even if this guy is writing in English, I don't know how fluent he would be in the Kiowa language, but definitely his parents were Kiowa of Kiowa descent. They taught school on the reserves, the two of them. One was his mother was a language, so he picked up the written aspect of poetry in English, but not just in English, I'm sure, but predominantly in English because that's how he got himself known. And his father was a painter, so he likes to paint too. But his prayer to all of creation or through all of creation, even if he does it in English, and also his respect of the ancestors, I could really see it in how this other fellow, Jeffrey Palmer, the Kiowa filmmaker, looks white. You figure it's a guy that you meet on Fifth Avenue or something in Manhattan. You think his name would be like F. Scott Fitzgerald or something like that. Yeah. Even Jeffrey Palmer, that sounds pretty, Americano to me. But he's Kiowa. So this appearances can be deceiving, And the native. There's two things I'll just end off on. Is that he used the buffalo so much because the Kiowa were buffalo hunters, and there's beautiful photography. He used drones to shoot some of the um, sacred hills in the Kiowa, territory, and animation. Even if there were shots of real buffalo, I believe, or pictures, they put animated buffalo in the plains scenes where there's an actual person on horse, but you could see what you could do by adding animation to to real moving pictures, combining the two. It was really powerful. So I couldn't help but think about everything that had just taken place with Elizabeth and how she'll translate everything that she's. We're doing this recital in English, but there's something that she's translating, I'm sure, at this very instant to the UK reality, same way that this Jeffrey Palmer or the Ian Scott Nomaday have done. And I'm sure the same way that the Mind family is doing, because that's the last thing. They did hear about this, but we don't know how the council process works in the traditions. We need to know the Nehewak. We need to know maybe more that they show us more about how they counsel, because that would make us getting the message to them easier. But I did try and get the message by email to Cheyenne and to Neil, to Ria I spoke to on the phone, and to Chris, to City, at the same time asking them, to say hi to their mother and their father. And I'm trusting that through our relationships, all our relationships, this is going to go somewhere. So to all our relations, Niawagoa. So,
Well, okay, we're just going to pick up where we left off yesterday. Does anybody remember where we left off? Okay, rights of the people of the 5 nations. Whenever especially 1.91, whenever especially important matter or great emergency is presented before the Confederacy Council, and the nature of the matter affects the entire body of the 5 nations, threatening their utter ruin, then the chiefs of the Confederacy must submit the matter to the decision of their people, and the decision of the people shall affect the decision of the Confederacy Council. This decision shall be a confirmation of the voice of the people. When we consider everything, the structure of the clan system and the council system, we know that the people have their immediate recourse to absolutely everything, anything that is taking place on any level, whether it's a spiritual level, social, political, on any level, the people have automatic and immediate access to their leadership, to their male chieftainship titles, and to their female chieftainship titles. So we know that it's there all the time, anyways. That before anything is approaching, through the clan meetings, again, within the Ganyangahaga, there are 3 clans: Turtle, Wolf, and Bear, and each one has 3 within there, so that is 9. And each one again is broken down into female and male, so there is 18. So within the nation of people, you have 18 possible avenues of recourse or of accessing from the most remotest voice or the most smallest voice right to the general council. Everybody has that immediate access all the time. So it is something that is always there, but this is to identify under like emergency, where something is threatening our utter ruin. In order for there to be an emergency, such conditions, this would identify that, well, there are perhaps no chiefs or clan mothers in position. If there was and everything was functioning, it would most likely not reach that level of saying, well, it's a emergency threatening our utter ruin, and everybody's got to scramble to do something about it. The only way that would happen is under the conditions that we are today, where everybody within the Five Nations Confederacy has put themselves outside of law by either uh, what's the word here, where you forget to apply it, where you don't apply it, neglect, either through neglect or through direct violation. This is where the people are today, and so we can see that when such a circumstance arises as what is identified here, what is addressed in this wampum, is that it's identifying that you would already be in a chaos situation. That this is to identify then to like bypass any kind of uh, established protocols that aren't there because nobody's there to be upholding them. Then this is where it identifies and activates all the people, that the people have this responsibility. So when there is no Confederacy Council, when there is no Nation Council, when there isn't even any clan councils, then whatever is left, whoever is there, has that right and that power, the authority to conduct council, to address all issues. This is where actually how you got here, where we are, is that this is what we went through here within the Ganyangahaga Nation. Again, we go back to that last Grand Council that identified there's no more Five Nations Grand Council, nothing legal. It identifies that there is no structure within the Ganyangahaga any longer, that all the people have left their responsibilities to the nation. And so you have the circumstances of a bunch of individuals, a bunch of different voices with um, no collective counsel and therefore no collective voice. The individual voices remain precisely that, individual. And when it is individual, there is no one under those circumstances that can represent the collective. And so this provision is put in place to identify how you get the collective voice. This is what we done. How we got the collective voice is by following the protocols of Guyana Nasaragoa. When this chief and Clan Muller isn't in place, well, what happens? Do you reach a dead end? No. If it's not in place, then the people have the power to affect council to address these issues, and when to address any issue. And when this has happened, this is how the individual can attain the power and the authority to represent. Of course, has to go through protocols. It can't be just anybody coming up and saying, okay, I'm going to have this council and it gives me the authority. First off, you have to come from the continuous, unbroken bloodline of the Ganyangahaga, of the people of the Longhouse. Whereas today, there is nobody that is left from that. We are the only people now that comes from that continuous, unbroken bloodline. Everybody else now within what calls themselves as Mohawk, they are not from that continuous, unbroken bloodline. These are all people who don't even have history being within Longhouse. They don't have history of being within our identity to know even how to represent or what Ganyangahaga is to be able to represent it. Anyways, so this one wampum identifies first conditions of chaos, where there is no chieftainship titles, where the structure is not in place, where it's not functioning. This is why it identifies rights of the people. So this is after it breaks down, after the structure breaks down, then the people have the right and the authority. Any questions on that? If not, we'll move on. Okay, wampum 92. The women of every clan of the Five Nations shall have a council fire ever burning in readiness for a council of the clan. When in their opinion it seems necessary for the interest of the people, they shall hold a council and their decision and recommendation shall be introduced before the Council of Chiefs by the War Chief for its consideration. Now, there's something clear, not clear, there's something kind of hidden in there where you just take for granted that you understand what is being said. It identifies the women of the clan must continuously have the council fire burning for the clan. Okay, so that identifies something. Who is within the clan? Anybody? Just the women?
The men too?
Okay, see, you pay attention to the question. You were answering just who are in the women's council in the clan. We asked, it says, who is in the clan? So that is not only women, that is also men. So you know that the men have their own council fire in each clan, and in the general men's council fire, you know that the women have their council fire and the women's general council fire, and the women are the owners of the clan. So the women have a clan fire, and they have the women's fire within the clan. But the men only have the men's clan fire. Uh, yeah, the men's fire within the clan. So the women have they preside over two councils. They preside over their own council, and then they preside over the clan council. It's not the men that preside over that clan. And so what's hidden in here, or it's not hidden, it's there. It's just a matter of paying attention. Is that it's a dual purpose that the women carry, or maybe not a dual purpose, but more responsibility. You got more responsibility. You carry your own clan council fire, and then you carry for the women. Then you carry the council fire for the entire clan. The men do not carry that council fire for the clan. So there it shows you, or there is a protocol there, a structure that actually identifies how and where the women have this authority, how it is enacted, the structures that identify it. Okay, if there's nothing on that, we'll move on. Okay, wampum 93. The men of every clan of the five nations shall have a council fire ever burning in readiness for a council of the clan. When it seems necessary for a council to be held to discuss the welfare of the clans, then the men may gather about the fire. This council shall have the same rights as the council of the women. Now, this is where it sounds kind of tricky. That the women of the clan have to have the fire burning always ready for a meeting of the clan. The men have to have a fire burning always ready for a meeting of the clan. But the women are the head of the clan. The women are the owner of that clan. So here it's identifying that the men having the fire ready for the clan constantly is the woman's uh, the women's fire, not the women's council fire, but it is the clan, and therefore the clan belonging to the women. It's identifying how the men are under the authority of the women. That it's your fire, but it's the men that are supposed to keep that fire going, keep it ready all the time. But the wampum before it identifies that the women are supposed to have that fire constantly burning for have it ready for a meeting of the clan. So let's see. You come to this fire. The women are supposed to do it. The men are supposed to do it. It sounds like almost like there's going to be an argument. Which one is managing this clan fire? Who is keeping it constantly ready for a meeting of the clan? Well, it's the women because they are presiding over it. And so, if the women were here and the men were here, it's the same fire. The women are directing the men to keep this fire going, keep the space ready for a clan meeting constantly. And the men are here in the same place, and they are quite simply receiving the direction of the women. So it shows a separate responsibility that each have, the women and the men, but the men are under the authority of the women. Okay, if there's any question on that, anything? If not, we're going to move on. Boy, we're really going to have a hard time with these people next door here today, eh? Okay, 94. All the clan council fires of a nation or of the 5 nations may unite into one general council fire, or delegates from all the council fires may be appointed to unite in a general council for discussing the interest of the people. The people shall have the right to make appointments and to delegate their power to others of their number. When their council shall have come to a conclusion on any matter, their decision shall be reported to the council of the nation or to the confederacy council, as the case may require, by the war chief or the war chiefs. Okay, now, when you're hearing this, the people have the right to have their own fire. And it says when they're done, they'll report it to the chiefs. Well, you know that the chiefs having their council is the council of the people. So what does this identify? It's identifying a separation of the people and the chieftainship titles. Now, that is not in a regular, regular conditions. This is, of course, under um, emergency conditions. Why would the people have a council separate from the chiefs and clan mothers? Why would they have that? Knowing that the regularly scheduled councils are there to be presided over by the chiefs and clan mothers. Well, this identifies that there would be some kind of condition that exists that creates a rift, a division between the people and the leadership. Now, this happens within all peoples, all nations. You could see the example right now. We'll identify in the so-called United States, where there is a rift, a division between the people and their leadership. This is a possibility that always exists of corruption in any peoples, in any nation, and that within corruption, of course, individuals steal power or authority of the people and overrule. This is where the current conditions are in the so-called United States, where you got such a corrupt individual who has basically co-opted the power of the people to represent the people. So the people, instead of being represented by the highest, most evolved of us in the so-called United States right now, the people have their power co-opted. They're being represented by the lowest, the least evolved, the most corrupted. So this is a real possibility in all peoples, in all nations. And so there must be provisions to guarantee the people have access to overruling their corrupt leaders. Like right now in the United States, everybody, so-called United States, everybody knows their leader is corrupt. Everybody knows that he's a racist, that he's a sexist, he's all the worst traits that you could imagine. Everybody knows that. Now, who in their right mind would have somebody like that representing them? Nobody. But you can see that this is the conditions, and in the so-called United States, that when you have the lowest of you representing you, then that will activate all the lowest within that nation, within those people. And this is the reason why you see such racism sticking its ugly head up again in the so-called United States. You see such sexism. You see such violence occurring. You see where there is no truth. Everybody is a liar. Through the atmosphere created by their leadership, where there is doubt cast on everyone, where there is a breakdown of the established protocols between the people, even if they were corrupted, like in the past. You know that in the so-called United States, people had at least access through the media to address the issues or the corruptions within their government. Now, That doesn't exist. Big deal. You can still say you have media, but for all intents and purposes, the so-called leadership in the so-called United States has completely severed the ties or the root that the people have to even asking questions. Now, the people are in so-called democracies. You're subjected to not you. You cannot talk to your politicians. You don't have enough money. Somebody else can talk to your politicians, and that's people who are lobbyists, people who represent special interests, people who have money, who then get the attention of your politicians. But you, on your own, try to talk to your politician, forget it. Never happen. And if they do listen to you, maybe they're stuck in some extenuating circumstances where maybe you're in public and you ask a question somehow and they're compelled to then answer it. But under any other conditions, you're not going to get close to any of your politicians. And if they do end up under those circumstances listening to you, it's just going to be lip service that they offer. They're not going to be actually taking your word and representing it, because politicians in so-called democracy does not represent people. They represent the interests that have put them into their political position. And those interests are not people. People do, no matter what, how many people vote, it doesn't matter. This game of democracy, it's already established who is going to be. Maybe not specifically this person at this time, but it's always going to be the lowest, the most corrupted, and so therefore it's decided ahead of time who is going to be. So if you got five candidates who are, say, running for office, you know which one it's going to be. It's going to be the most corrupted one, the one with the most money, the one with the most influence, because of people aligning themselves with them as with politicians because of their corporate interests, their lobbying interests. So it's always going to be the most corrupted in your society. You're never going to have the person who truly represents the broad spectrum of people. You're going to have, like what you got right now, all out corruption, where again, nobody knows what the truth is. Nobody knows even what national policy is any longer. It's been decided basically by the mood swings of a racist, sexist, corrupted individual who's at the captain's helm of that pirate ship. So to avoid that, provisions put in place. It's hard for people to understand because it seems like one wampum contradicts the other. But until you get into that position, like say for instance, like what's happening in Venezuela, until you get into that position of where there is chaos, political chaos, then you will not be able to fully appreciate what these provisions are. These provisions are so that you can deal with those chaotic situations where the people have already sunk beyond the level of collective voice, collective representation. Okay, if there's nothing on that, we will move on. Which one did I leave off on? Okay, 94. All the clan council fires of a nation, or of the five nations. Oh, I done that.
Yeah.
Okay. 95.
Mm-hmm.
Before the real people united their nations, each nation had its own council fires. Before the great peace, their council fire was held. The five nations' council fires shall continue to burn as before, and they are not quenched. The chiefs of each nation in the future shall settle their nation's affairs at the council fire, governed always by the laws and rules of the great peace of the five nations confederacy. So, it was basically this, as you know, like we went over the conditions that existed before the establishment of the Great Peace. We were at war. So imagine your hand, chaos, where the message is coming from your brain to your hand, to squeeze your hand. Imagine that those signals are all mixed up. So what you're sending to the thumb is going to the little finger. What you're sending to the other one is going to another one. None of them are going to the proper place. It's chaos. So this means that your central point of consciousness cannot control your body. Now, we'll give a scenario, and all of you know this. There's a question that we ask all the time whenever we're out talking to people. We always ask, who here wants to kill our Mother Earth? Nobody raises their hand. Everybody keeps their hand down. But when we ask the other question, who here is killing our Mother Earth? Everybody has to put their hand up. So this shows you that in the individual mind, that you have this highest thought of yourself, this highest belief. Yes, I don't want to kill Mother Earth. But then, when you ask the question, who is killing? Everybody has to raise their hand. So it shows you your highest whatever belief in yourself, but then the separation of what you actually do. So it shows an imbalance of our body and spirit. Our spirit will think the highest, but our body compromises what is in our mind. What our mind is thinking, our body actually compromises what we want our body to do. So this shows us that we are not in control of our body. So now, under those circumstances, not being in control of your hand. Again, so I want to grab something with my thumb and the rest of my hand, and instead of the signal going to my thumb, it's going to my little finger. How am I going to grab anything like that? I will not be able to. And again, vice versa. All the signals all mixed up, going to different places. This is a chaotic situation that existed before the establishment of the Great Peace. So it meant that the mind, had no control over the body. So our Mother Earth had no control over the people. The people are the body. We are the functions of the body. So when the people were at war, our Mother Earth is not represented. Our Mother Earth is what? Life, love. So when the people are at war, of course, life and love is not represented anywhere. Life and love is thrown out. It doesn't exist nowhere. That is chaos. This is the chaos that exists and has existed in the non-native world for thousands of years. But here, we again, when it identifies that we had these council fires before the Great Peace was established. So just imagine your fingers as these council fires. It's the 5 nations. They were in disarray, disorder. But as it says, after the establishment of the Great Peace, those council fires will continue to burn. They will not be quenched. So it's a council fire of the nation yesterday. If the Great Law of Peace was established today, yesterday that nation was at war. And how it was thinking was through its council process. So you think coming out of war, we would not bring any of that with us. But the council fire is the actual structure, the physical body of that nation. It's like the finger, like the structure of it. It's just that the messages and all what makes it up, the mind, it's all a jumble inside the body, inside the fingers. So it was a war council. Today, it's the same council, but now as it's identified, those councils, same councils remain, but now they will all function under the Great Law of Peace. Whereas yesterday, the Senecas were functioning under whatever they were functioning under, so were we, each of us were. And of course, you know it's chaos because it has us in war. So what all that it identifies is that it's like a computer. A computer, you're programmed to do taxes. Let's say you got a program just for doing taxes. Well, you got to scrap that program and make a program for managing a society. So this is all that happened with the formation of the league, the establishment of the Great Law of Peace. It was a changing of the people's program. This identifies to you that if it can be done here, it can be done anywhere. You can change the people's program just like that. In this world right now, we can look at it and say, oh, it's impossible. The job is too big to be able to change the program of all 7 billion people on the planet. It is not. It is changing or altering people, as you know, manipulating people is the easiest thing to do in the world because all 7 billion people are manipulated into a corruption. It was easy, Very easy. So it would be just as easy to change the people back from corruption back to where the people were prior to the corruptions of male dominance and the false man-made religions of thousands of years ago that locked everybody into constant non-stop state of war. It is easy to change it. The only thing is that it takes the will to change it. And the fact is that in the male dominance, which is based on greed, it nurtures the laziness of absolutely everybody. You always want the shortcut. And so, because of that, nobody wants to do what it takes to correct things. And part of that laziness is, well, that laziness is rooted within the monetization of creation, the commodification. Because when you commodify, it gives you a power over not only that thing, it gives you a power over other people. And when you got power over other people, nobody will take the avenues of correction. Like here in Ganawagi and throughout the Five Nations, everybody has become so corrupted through the poison of money that now the super rich people, they will never do the work themselves. They will always pay somebody else to do the work. And there's always somebody willing to take that money to do that work. But let's see, that person on their own who's got all that money, are they capable? Are they fit? Are they able to do those jobs, whatever it may be? In most cases, no. They themselves cannot do that job that they are paying somebody else to do. Now, it's okay if your car breaks down and you go to a mechanic. You know, you're going to pay somebody else to do that job. But when you're talking about managing your family, managing your society, your nation, this is where the laziness comes in, as a result of the commodification, the greed, that it makes everybody basically useless to their people. And the people who have hoarded the money are the ones that are the most useless because they influence other people through their money to stay away from actual correction, from actually doing the right thing. They are influenced away. And in this town here, it is very visible, very evident when you know that, well, there's this super rich person over there, super rich person over there. They got everybody that works for them all bought off. They can be a rapist, they can be a murderer, they can commit crimes against people. It doesn't matter. The money that they got buys off other people. And so when you're in circumstances like that, the one with the money finds, just like prior to the establishment of the Great Peace, Tadadaho, you find yourself in a situation like that, where you are a dictator, where you are a king, or where you have influence to manipulate other people. So, anyways, when this occurs, or when it is within the society, it is a corruption that you can almost not get out of the society. It becomes almost totally inescapable, that you can't get away from it. Hence, this is where we are today in the world. We are in this circumstance where you cannot get away from the corruption. That absolutely everybody from head to toe is locked into that corruption as a result of the male dominance that has spread throughout the world. So, anyways, yeah, it just shows that the people have this responsibility, and it shows you when you reach those circumstances, it shows the people how to get out of it. Now, the rest of the Five Nations, since they don't know law, they don't know how to get out of the corruption that they are locked into currently. But here we have law. And this is the thing that enables us to be able to rise above everyone else's corruption and to be able to function as nation. As long as somebody follows these laws, you will never be under the control or authority or oppression of anybody else. You will always be within your own power, functioning from within your own identity, and your identity is derived from law, the law of creation. So today, when you got everybody outside of law, the identity of everybody is not anything to do with creation. When you know that 7 billion people are destroying the planet, you know that their identity is not coming from the creation. Because if they're destroying it, you know it's not their identity. Anyways, if there's anything anybody wants to say on this.
Hello, it's Elsa again. I was listening to the last one boom, and even the one before when Stewart spoke about the United States and Trump, and this one too makes me think of the fractal, like the society is a reproduction of a smaller world, which is more like the individual mind. And so for me, it's like the split mind and schizophrenia and multiple identities, societies going in there willfully choosing democracy and choosing this political system, like they choose their own president. So for me, it's all coming back to the schizophrenic mind. Would be the identity that we know more of is the most violent one, the one who can defend the others. And the whole thing is because the division, and it's not a holistic system. The mind is divided in multiple identities, so the society can be that way too. Which we can choose the one who's the most violent or as strangely and paradoxical as it can be, the most racist or sexist or whatever, like our cousins, southern cousins are doing. And also, I wanted to say that for me, the Canicerogoa is a structure of effort, the effort to be whole, to be able to go to emergency status, that we have to defend ourselves, and but also to very peaceful part of the mind, the society, the community's mind would be more about love and peace. So for me, it's it's a structure, an effort to bring back the wholeness and not go into division of the mind.
I'll just say quickly that these last few wampum have made me realize the incredible responsibility that the women in the house has here vis-a-vis everybody so close physically. Right? And that's why I remembered. I believe when I was coming up, I went down early. I got some water from some of the services in the town. Not today, but I had the habit of going out, and and then driving back. I said, "Wow, yeah, I'm still under the protection. I've always been under the protection of the Holy Spirit there." But these last wampum have made me realize. I mean, like because of the interconnectivity, like in the neural network, if the one neuron doesn't want to receive the wampum or the message of the next wampum, was touched upon it. I mean, I guess I don't want to get too much into experimental astrobiophysics, but it's almost as if that physical entity of the neuron is saying, "No, no, my neighbor doesn't exist," you know. So they must be imagining what they're trying to tell me, and something about cancer or something about how serious illness takes over the whole body comes to light. And now we're talking about a social ill that the very close neighbors here are suffering under, and we know that it's all connected to money in great part. Huh? Uh, um, Yesterday in the other spiritual traditions, it's about this guy Jesus that says, "Hey, we're being taxed." Somebody complains to him, and he says, "We're being taxed to death by these Romans. We're not Romans. Why should we pay these taxes?" He says, "Well, listen, I agree with you, but I mean, there's a there's a military political power they have over us. Let's just keep on believing that we are following the pacification as we know it. Just throw your line into the ocean, pulls out a fish with two coins. The fish has two coins in his mouth. So one is to pay the taxes, or no, one is to pay the taxes for himself. He's the least of the taxable, and the other coin is for the person who's under him, but it raises the question. So both their taxes are paid, but the symbol of the fish, and this is just symbol, of earlier peoples. That's still to this day, it's the real symbol of peace. And I just can't help but think that, like in this town, and through the whole Five Nations, and in the whole of Turtle Island, and the whole world, there's like all these tremors. Or they're not. Hopefully, they're not tremors like mental or intellectual tremors, but they could be. Maybe in one person's mind, there's like a total, earthquake of consciousness that's happening right now, huh? And it's happening in my mind as I speak too, because that's how interconnected we are. I realize the words that I'm speaking, but I'm hoping uh, that the effort that is made here is having, through osmosis, through that interconnectivity, that consciousness, like water, is always going to, it's always going to seek out itself, right? It attracts itself. Well, the truth should attract and can, and I think does attract itself, right? So the truths that maybe are being realized, maybe not spoken to this degree here, but maybe to lesser effort. People might be busy. They might not be in the habit anymore. They might not realize certain things, and then all of a sudden the light goes on, and that's a privilege of being able to be in interaction, because you might not be able to share 100% of the Guyana Rossarago of the whole piece, or of the words of that other peacemaker. You might not be able to share 100% of it all the time, but you can share a little bit of it, and that little bit of it can go maybe a long distance. So my thoughts earlier about speaking about this Bear Clan person, who I attribute kind of a bear identity, and he does to himself, this guy from the Kiowa Nation, makes me remember what I said to Louise last night. I said, listen, if you are saying your words of whatever you want to call them, Thanksgiving, whatever, prayers, but they're going through creation, then they're coming out of going through creation, they're with creation. And that's a reality. The same way that I will ask for the guidance of my ancestors, of all our ancestors, so that the good words are chosen, but that we can prepare, maybe for extraordinary, hopefully positive moments, but for all the moments that come in extraordinary moments, such as this one. Oh,
Boy, those little clouds went away, and that sun is burning. Holy smokes, it's burning hot here in the sun. Whew. I guess this afternoon, if it's still like this, we're gonna go back under the pines. I mean, I love the sun too, but if we're not by the water to jump in and cool off, this is too much. Okay, 96. This is the last one, wampum, under rights of the people of the Five Nations. If either a niece or a nephew should see an irregularity in the performance of the functions of the Great Peace and its laws in the Peace Council or in the conferring of chieftainship titles in an improper way, through their war chief, they may demand that such actions become subject to correction and that the matter conform to the ways prescribed by the Great Law of Peace. Again, sounds simple. Sounds very straightforward, but we have to understand the structure here and the context in which this is being identified. Okay, there's an irregularity that the chiefs are carrying out. This is what this identifies. So, when there's an irregularity, somebody's breaking the law, they're not adhering to it. Well, what can the people do? You go to your war chief, and the war chief brings it forward. Sounds simple. Why? How is that that a war chief is the one that you approach, and how does the war chief have this avenue to make this correction? Do not forget that the war chief is rooted within the Turtle clan in each of the nations. It is the owner of the house. Again, we'll go back to what the Turtle clan is, to the foundations within the creation story. We know that everything rests upon the turtle's back, that it is the owner of the house, and that whatever has been created between the two opposite powers, whatever is initiated and then deliberated upon, if between Turtle and Yawago and Suiskara, if it is accepted by the turtle, then it will be allowed to live on the turtle's back. So the turtle is the owner of creation. It is like the source of our physical creation. So it is the main, uh, like the blueprint to our structure. And so this is the reason why that the war chief is rooted within the Turtle clan, because they have that direct link, direct connection, just like the women have that direct link connection to all creation. So the Turtle clan has access to that also. So the war chief coming from the Turtle clan, again, what is his job? Anybody? What is the job of the war chief? What else? What does the war chief do?
Cut the corruption.
Yeah, the big knife, but what does he do if there is no corruption? What is he doing? He observes. He observes the council. So that means he is not a part of it, but he is the authority. So this means that that war chief is on a certain level the equivalent of a peacetime chief, but also has to be more than a peacetime chief. As you can see, that the peacetime chief is subject to corruption, where the war chief has to preside over that and to be able to cut it out. So to do that, he has to be at an arm's length from that council, but he has authority over that council. So this is the reason why you approach the war chief, because the war chief is supposed to fill that responsibility for the people. So this is the reason why, again, the war chief is such an important position, that even though they're not a peacetime chief, they are established through the same protocols, so that it's established on an official level in all the nations. This is that big knife. That there's 5 of them only. So that's the big knife in each of the nations. And so if you were of these nations, you would know the big knife in each of those nations. Each nation knows the big knife in the other nations. So there is an established recognition of authority over the peace council. Not that it can overrule it, but that it has the sole authority of correction to correct it. It's not, okay, not the sole authority, but the sole final authority. That, the women have the authority to correct it. The men together have the authority to correct it, the people, but also at the end of the day, no matter what, they all go through the war chief. So it's not that the war chief has the authority more so than anybody else. It's that it is the recognized function within the structure of political representation. Just like the way today, all of you know that there is police. And everybody knows that, well, if you're going to run through a stop sign, the police are going to stop you. So, you know that within the political structure of a peace council, that there is an authority there also that is recognized by all the people. And in this way, all the people keep that authority pure. That as long as the people are not keeping up their knowledge of law, that position will always be tested because there'll always be somebody in the Ganyangahaga Nation. Somebody will come forward and say to the war chief, "Hey, this guy's doing this," and the war chief will have to be able to decide right then and there. Is it true? Because the war chief isn't just a puppet that is controlled to the highest bidder. That soon as somebody calls that war chief, like today, you call the cops. That's how they are. They're sold to the highest bidder, meaning the first person who calls them, that's who they are going along with. Again, so if I call the cops on you and I'm corrupt, I just want to get you in trouble. The cops do not matter. They don't care. They are going to go to you, they're going to arrest you, they're going to bring you into court and have you then defend yourself and prove that you're not guilty in court. And so that is corruption, of course, and this is what the function of police are in this world. You think they are there to protect you. This is what actually corrupts the society. Because when the society leaves it to a corrupt body to determine law based on their own perception, and when you consider police, how much law do they actually know? What do they know of Constitution? Because the laws that they apply or what they affect criminal law, those things clash with Constitution. So this is part of the reason why, as Elsa identified, of a schizophrenic mentality, because you got laws here in so-called Canada, you got laws that clash with your Constitution. You got politicians that break your Constitution every day, and there is nobody to prevent your politicians from breaking Constitution. But you have police that affect criminal law upon you every day that go against that Constitution. So you are in, through any democracy, you are in that schizophrenic mentality. Anyways, so the people have this access through the war chief. Again, you bring your complaint there. He's going to have to determine. Wait a minute, your complaint does not warrant any action. So this means that the war chief cannot just say that to you. He's got to be able to identify in law uh, to identify the solution or the resolve to your thing that you're putting forward. And if he can't, then he has to bring it to the council. So think of this: somebody's bringing a complaint of the council of a peace chief, and the war chief cannot decide either way if it's true or not, if it constitutes it going to council. So if he can't determine that, if he cannot satisfy the person who's posing this, then he has to bring it to council. He can't just push it away. And so, even if that war chief does not know, the protocol, it will, through these protocols, get to the place of where the proper decision can be made, which would then be in the Peace Chief Council. So, first off, you're talking about in the Peace Chief Council where there's a corruption. Okay, we're doing something. We're saying 1 and 1 is 2, when we know 1 and 1 makes 3. So here's somebody in the people saying, hey, they're saying 1 and 1 makes 2. That's a corruption. They bring it to the war chief. The war chief can't decide if it's a corruption. Can't decide. So he's got to bring it to the council, where they are the ones saying 1 and 1 makes 2. And so it gets there to them who are making the wrong decision to now address their own erroneous decision. This is where we said before about the schizophrenia of democracy, is that it, of course, schizophrenia is a psychosis where the body does not function properly. So, in the mind of a schizophrenic person, there is a way to bring these things under control, these different identities. There is a way to do that. This is what we've done. We were schizophrenic too. By being in war, it makes you schizophrenic. Because you come home at night and you love your wife or you love your girlfriend, you love your children, but you're out killing in the daytime. That is the epitome of schizophrenia. So this is where, when you consider all democracies of the world have standing armies, and now, like so-called Canada, United States, by 2020, they're going to be just like their leader, Israel, where by the time you're 16, you have to have a gun in your hand. By the time you're 18, you have to have killed somebody. That is schizophrenia in the minds of every individual within that society, because you believe you're good people, but you have a standing army. And that standing army will, if it's got nobody else to war against or to do anything against, it will eat itself. So it will oppress itself. And this is what you have in the so-called United States, so-called Canada, all first world countries. By them being so schizophrenic, they have created an extension of their schizophrenia, a new identity called NATO. And that NATO undermines every individual country that is a part of that structure. So every country, like so-called Canada, says they're a country of laws. But NATO actually gets them to break their own laws, gets them to break their own constitution. Gets you to believe, you say, we're a country of laws. Well, what is the law if you are making weapons? You're making those weapons to use them. So the law is to kill. That is the law in democracy. And so democracy has no mechanisms of which anybody within it ever comes to their senses. You got no way out of it. You are locked into the insanity of the schizophrenic mind as a result of democracy. But here there are provisions of what even the schizophrenic mind can find its way out of its own corruption. As long as each nation, meaning each identity, knows the law, that every individual in the nation knows the law, that individual nation will bring itself into order. That individual identity in the schizophrenic mind will be able to bring itself into order and then align itself with the other identities in the schizophrenic mind and establish balance. This is precisely what happened within the Five Nations Longhouse Confederacy. We were schizophrenic too. We were at war. Killing. That means you have a psychosis. And it's a psychosis of schizophrenia. Okay, if there's nothing on that, we're going to continue. Okay, here we go.
Respectfully, I just want to ask this, that because we go back to the issue being addressed once again to the Peace Council from which the issue arose in the first place. So what's going to happen, this is the question, is eventually the corruption is going to be exposed. There has to be a level of consciousness. I can't help but wonder if that's not what is happening at this moment. It could be happening amongst us, but it could be happening right next door also. But it's the mechanism that I'm concerned about, because let's say they send it again. They they um, they expedite it, but in the wrong way. That peace council, the issue's been brought to them, and they just end up doing the corruption somehow sends this off on the other track again. What do you do in that instance?
Okay, going to be a long answer here. Got to give you an example. Okay, when there's the corruption there, how do we get out of it? Because, like what you said, eventually it will be exposed. It will expose itself. I'll show you what happened here. Okay, there was a division started from 1973. The band system here, the elected band system, was selling permits to non-native people to live here in Ganawagi. And the people of Ganawagi, who attended the band meetings, these were people who were basically supporters of the elected band system. Okay, they became up in arms saying, hey, what are all these non-native people doing living here when there was barely any housing for the people that were here? And when you got non-native people living amongst the Ganyagahaga, their collective thinking overpowers the collective thinking of the Ganyagahaga, because the Ganyagahaga is coming from a peace mentality, meaning let it happen how it wants to happen, where the mentality of the non-native people is a forced, where they force their opinion, force their way. And so, of course, when you're going to have non-native people here, uh, if they are not governed through the two-row wampum to be in accordance with the Great Law of Peace, they will always overpower. Always. Because a corruption will always overpower something that is not corrupt. So war will always overpower peace, because peace is not prepared for war. And so war, which is prepared for war, will easily just step over whoever is at peace. This is how you know that, or what happened here in so-called North and South America when the Spanish went into South America. Just basically a few Spanish people were able to wipe out millions of the indigenous people. Why is that? Was it because the men were chicken? They were afraid? No, it's that these people did not have a mentality of war. So when somebody's coming up to you, and you know that they're coming up to you like aggressive, and they're going to do something, you might stand there and think, well, what's the most going to happen? This person's going to punch my face? No, they're going to kill you. That's what happened with the original peoples in so-called South America. They were so easily wiped out by just a few Spanish monsters, just a few of them, able to wipe out the majority, millions of people. So when you are at peace, you have no structures to prevent what war intends to do, to wipe you out. So here in 73, when the ban system was now stuck in a dilemma, they were stuck in between their own corruption of selling permits to non-native people living here, and now the people from town were up in arms over that. The people did not know that the ban system was selling permits for non-native people to live here. The ban system was putting money in their pocket. Of course, they're corrupt. That's what they were doing. They're still doing the same thing now. But back then, when it came to the surface that these non-native people were here, and the town folk wanted to do something, the ban system knew that it couldn't do it because they're the ones that sold the permits. They'd be exposed. So when a lie is getting close to being discovered, it creates another lie, as you know. And when somebody lies, you got to tell another lie to cover up that lie. And the lies just got to keep building and building. So here, what they did was they sent somebody, it was Irving Goodleaf that they sent from the band system to go to the Longhouse at the time. And at the Longhouse, he brought the message of that they wanted the help of the Longhouse to evict all these non-native people. And of course, all of the chiefs and clan mothers said no, we are not to assist the band system in any way. But Louis Hall created the Warrior Society, which his you could say his general was Paul Delarone, Alan Thomas Delarone. At the time, the late Arthur Montour was still here in Ganawagi. This is where he was living. So at the time, they created the Warrior Society to go and to evict the non-native people. Now, the Warrior Society was created against the word of all the chiefs and clan mothers. So they were created by the elected band system. Now they went and evicted everybody, or they tried to. What happened was right here down Blind Ladies Hill where Daibo's garage is. There used to be a little white house there, a tiny little white house. It was probably just a one room house. There was an old French guy that lived in there. And he came out onto his porch. He had a 12 gauge shotgun in one hand, and he had a piece of paper in the other. I know because I was there. I seen this happen. He came out onto his porch and he says, "You're not getting me out of here. I have the right to be here." He said he had his permit, which the band system sold him. Anyways, that guy had a heart attack and he dropped dead right there on his porch. And Paul Delarone, the late Arthur Montour, were charged with murder. Actually, murder. Now, of course, there was a big court case that ensued, and within that court case, this is where the Warrior Society, created by the band system in the first place, were now between the rock and a hard place, where their deal was that they would have to leave Ganawagi. This is the reason why Arthur Montour left Ganawagi at that time, and he never came back. Why Paul Delarone was never able to live back here. As everybody knows, he was the gates, everything, because they were doing dealings with Hell's Angels and all the mafia and all of that. So he couldn't be safe. He had to have a compound. So he was never able to live here. Anyways, we, right from that time, fought against the Warrior Society. It went all the way to Grand Council in '74. In Grand Council, this is the first time that Grand Council where there was bloodshed that happened on the floor of Grand Council. It resulted in a fight between my father, Thomas, and Alan Delarone on Grand Council, on the floor of Grand Council. And from there, this is where we established here our complete separation from the corruption now, where this division amongst the people developed to such a point, and it was right near Glen Delarone's. It was right there. Anyways, there was a fight there, and big thing ensued. Cops came. I was in the bottom of the quarry. It was summertime. I get in my truck and we go down into the village. As soon as I pull out of the driveway, I see Tony Norton pulls up in one of the little Warrior cars that they had, these little gray cars that they bought to have to do patrols here in town, for which they took children out of the survival school. They put an AK-47 in their hand. They gave them $500 a week, all the cocaine they could have to drive around in those cars to patrol their cigarette industry. So, anyways, Tony Norton was in one of these cars. He pulled up right in front of it when I'm pulling out of the driveway. He was right there, and I yelled out to him. I says, "What the hell is going on?" And he was shocked that I had stopped him. And just then, there was a truck coming from up towards the PK's way where they're at now, and it was full of guys. And I seen that. Okay, I says, "Come on, right in the middle of the town at the Knights of Columbus parking lot, where they had us surrounded now." There was over 200 of them, 200 of the warriors, and there was just myself. Now they're all warrior society who basically we up until that point we were at war with them. It was fights in the streets. Anyways, this is where Paul Delarone was there, and he was the head with all these warriors telling them what to do, and they were standing. And I says, "Here we are. We're here. We're not running away." Nobody would lift a finger. But the example that I'm giving you is that this is where Paul Delarone was there with his cronies in the warrior society. We're not known to the people. So the violence has control over them. Now we jump ahead a whole bunch of years to 2016, where now the table is turned. This is where I explained to you is that we had requested, my father's still alive, we requested a or calls up the house and he leaves a message on the answering machine. He says, Sego, yeah, he says, yeah, okay, we talked to them and yeah, you could come down on this day that we could come and address their council. That was our request. We said, we want to come and address your council. Okay, Delarone is there. Others were there. Loran Thompson was there. Francis Boots, Harriet Boots, late Harriet Boots was still alive. Her husband John Boots was there. A few others, not many. And that's where I asked before I got up to speak. I asked them. I says, "Do any of you know me here?" And all the older guys, they all said, "Yeah, yeah, we know you." And I asked them, "How do you know me?" I says, "Do you know me from the time of one longhouse or after the division of 73?" And they all held up their finger and they all said, "One long." Okay, so then Paul Delarone is sitting there and he's got his people there, but now the tables have turned because we followed protocol. And following protocol, now I can say what I said to Paul Delarone in their own council, in their own house. I accused him of misleading the people down the path of the Gani Guraksa through their illegal cigarette trade. Okay, so 20 years earlier, he's got all his warriors surrounding me to bring violence upon me. 20 years later, I'm in his council fire, in his house, accusing him of misleading the people down the path of Gani Guraksa. If anybody said that to me, accused me of leading the people down the path of the Gani Guraksa, I would immediately jump on that. I don't care in what form, where we are at, I would address that immediately. Paul Delarone, of course, he can't address it. If he did, his corruption would be exposed. All he did was he waited for his phone to ring, and he got up and he walked out of the council. Now imagine somebody says that to you, and you don't address it. It shows you are corrupt. The point that I'm making here is that no matter how long it takes, you adhere to law. They cannot keep telling the lie because, as you know, again, once you tell a lie, you have to cover it up with another lie. At a certain point, that liar will just become exhausted and not be able to continue their own corruption. And so, as long as not reducing yourself to their game of turning to violence, the moment that you do, you are defeated. You will go nowhere. You will end right there. But as we adhere to process of law, protocols of law, it doesn't matter what they tried to do. They, as you know, they've done for you here. They tried to kill us in Tonawanda, Onondaga. A total of 7 times they tried to kill myself and my father. No, it never, obviously, it never worked. It failed. Because as long as we were adhering to law, the corrupt, anybody else other than Ganyanga Haga, you might have a very hard time trying to stay within that process. The Ganyanga Haga, this is the reason why we are the foundation of the great law of peace. Because no matter what, especially within and we will fight that enemy. We do not let go. We will take that thing down. And this is what's happening over the expanse of time. that the with the Warrior Society in particular as the example, they all thought whatever about Louis Hall. You know, Louis Hall, all his life he was Knights of Columbus. I don't care what anybody says. Anybody else does not know his origins. Anybody else today, they are not old enough. They were not in the Longhouse to know Louis Hall. But all you got to do is look on his death, at his funeral. My father and I went to where he was laid out. He was laid out at 207. And this is when we were still at war with the Warrior Society. We got nothing to do with them. We got, there's no love lost between us. But because Louis Hall came from the one longhouse, and we came from the one longhouse before there was division. Everybody else who's in so-called longhouse today followed Warrior Society. They were never in the longhouse. They have no history in there, none whatsoever. They are all Johnny come latelys, and they are only that because of the money of the cigarette trade. That's the only reason why all of those people have gravitated that way. But because he was from the one longhouse, my father and I, we counseled on it. My father didn't just decide, let's go pay our respects to Louis Hall. No, we counseled on it, and we had to determine if it was legal for us to do that in the first place, and if it would be conducive to everything that is happening here. Anyways, we went, and when we got there, the house was empty. There was nobody there. Louis Hall's body was in their longhouse, or what they called their longhouse, and there was nobody inside. There was only two people standing outside. That was Johnny Delarone, the Crow, and Frankie Norton. They were standing outside. So my father and I went inside. We go see Louis Hall, pay our last respects. I know Louis Hall since the time I was born into this world, since the time I was a little kid. Anyways, top of his shoulders and his head, it was, what do you call that, a bust? Anyways, he's looking to the left, and he's got a halo around his head. And he's got nothing to signify Mohawk. He does not have the feathers, just a halo. And so, on the bottom, there's a caption that read, "Holier than thou." Now, I don't care what anybody thinks they know about Louis Hall. Know anything about Louis Hall. Nothing. They don't know where he came from. They don't know what he was in the longhouse. They don't know the position, how he was borrowed, how he was not even sitting in his own clan. They got no idea about all these things. But you just look at the end of his life. If you stood for all of this, whatever you say, longhouse, whatever, warrior, then how come at the end of your life you got a halo around your own head in your self-portrait, and you are identifying yourself as being holier than thou? Let's see. Do longhouse people do that? No, they don't. Let's inquire. Well, who does that? Can we isolate down to its origins? Who has a halo around their head, and who would identify themselves as being holier than thou? Who? Christians. That comes from Christians. This is what he was. This is where he came from. Like most people in Ganawagi, they came out of the church. But he lived his whole life as that. He was a Knight of Columbus. Whether or not he was a card-carrying member, enemy, then that's what you are. Your identity is your enemy. And that's what he was, Christian. This long answer that I'm sure correct, a corruption that is so big that affects and poisons an entire nation, it takes a lifetime to stay steadfast in law, to stay adhering to every protocol, to where you can come from one instance where the guilty party is there with his warriors to kill you, to where you can walk right into his camp and accuse him of Gani Guruksa. And instead of you having to walk out of there worrying about what's going to happen, he walks out of his own house to avoid that charge that I personally put on him, on Paul Delaron. So, anyways, this is how it's done. Like I said, some things within law, a lot of things within law, most of the application, and even the people who have it to apply, you yourself will not actually sometimes know or be certain of it until it's applied. And then once it's applied, you'll know it. It's like, again, emergency provisions. If you were never in emergency and you got to do something to save your life, well, you never knew it before because you never had emergency condition to save your life before. So once you do it, take for instance, what is that adrenaline, a needle of adrenaline that when somebody's like having a heart attack or something, nowadays they'll stick the needle right into your heart, put that adrenaline right into your heart. Under normal conditions, you would never do that. You would never believe that would do anything. Right now, I'm not going to come up with and say, hey, let's stick a needle in my heart. Because we know that if we did that right now, it would probably kill me. So when you're in that emergency and you're told, stick this needle of adrenaline into your heart, when you're told that, you might not believe it. But if you did it, you'd find the truth to it. You'd find the reality. So this is the emergency provision. This is an emergency provision there of the people. It is rights and powers of the people in relation to chieftainship title. And so again, when the people have to apply such thing, it's not in a normal time, it's not normal conditions. You are in the process of having a heart attack, and you must stick that needle in your heart with adrenaline to save your life. Under any other conditions, it will kill you. So don't do it under any other conditions. Would be the equivalent of crying wolf. Somebody coming forward and putting charges down that are not true. If I place charges down that were not true, when I went to their house in Akwesasne in 2015, it was April 16th, April 15th, 2016. When we went to their house in Akwesasne, if I would have, instead, what you see is like what Paul Delaron did, he ran from that council. And to this day, I would challenge anytime, anywhere, in front of anybody, any place. So I would stand there with the same charge on Paul Delaron of leading the people down the path of the Gani Guraksa, misleading them down the path of the Gani Guraksa. That is a reality. And that reality, as long as I stay applying that, standing for that, that is the only thing that makes me true, that makes me just in my position. If the moment that I forget about that, then that means I allow his behavior. And if I allow his behavior, then I am as corrupt as him. So the people cannot be afraid to uphold Guyana Rasa Goa, because he's never been within Guyana Rasa. Matter of fact, last time he was, I can say, it goes back to even prior to 73, goes back to the early 60s, when in the Longhouse, when we were down still by the late Dominic Dibos, which is where, on the 207, which is where the Eagle's Nest is now. The Longhouse used to be there. And there, this is where him and others, being the singers of the songs, they used to charge. They wouldn't sing unless there was like a blanket dance, like if people would throw money into a blanket. So right from that time, nature. But when it came time in '73, when they created the corruption of the Warrior Society, they've been outside of law completely ever since '73 on this path. And eventually, as you see, they are wearing down. When there were still people were still in the house here, we all went to Akwesasne, to their house. And that was the first time that I put those charges on Paul. And that's where he got up, he walked outside, he didn't address it on the floor of the council. The second time, this is where, anyways, she walks halfway across the floor, and I go and I meet her, and she hugs me. She gives me a big hug, and she expressed how happy she was. And I asked her, I says, did this need to be said, spoken on the floor of council? And she said, yes. And she was so happy, she hugged me, and she says, finally. So, anyways, it's a matter of the voice of will not be heard, which means everybody is oppressed. The moment somebody speaks law, that will release the pressure on the women, on the land itself. Takes to be man enough, to be brave enough, to be woman enough to continue to maintain course, to stay steadfast within Guyana Goa. But the problem is that today, nobody, none of the people who claim to be Guyana Goa or Longhouse, none of them are Longhouse. None of them know anything about Guyana Goa. But this is how, the answer to your question, how it is done, is stay steadfast. Don't ever look for the shortcut, the short answer, because there is no such thing. There is no shortcut, there is no short answer. And this is where, again, you must be, as we said, we live in multi-dimensions, those 3 dimensions. Be able to defend your position, and your position, whatever it is, even if it's in law, you will succumb. We'll continue. Okay, what are we looking at time-wise here? Because now we're going into rites and ceremonies protected. I'm wondering if we should break. Okay, let me see. We'll take a break. Okay, we're gonna break for lunch. So, like usual, it's like an hour and a half. You'll hear the drum, we come back. Okay, go.